Hello and welcome to Banking Frontiers Live. We are in midst of some wonderful fintech conversations. With me today is a very interesting personality from the field of retail payments. His name is Suhail Sameer and he is the group president of BharatPe, which is one of the celebrated fintechs. And let us try to know what makes this fintech a celebrity. Hi Sunil,
Hi.
Suhail, welcome
Thanks
to
for
Banking
being
Frontiers.
here.
You have been seeing a lot of transition yourself in your career from consulting to energy to FMCG and today into retail payments, which is also the most happening industry today. So I have read something where you have written in your LinkedIn that monotony is not an option for me and I like to make sense out of chaos. So let us know how you are making sense out of chaos.
No, yeah, this is a very exciting industry, growth so fast and sort of the backbone of the country, right? So I'm very excited to be finally in my life coming into financial services. I think making sense of chaos is something I enjoy, and I think at the core it's quite simple, right? So I've always had this principle, irrespective of the industry I worked in, that if you think consumer first, you will by and large get to the right answer, right? So, and the consumer in this context happens to be a merchant, but consumer is eventually a human being with a set of emotions, with a set of things which work for him, and which a set of things he wants, right? So, as long as you start thinking your consumer first, you always end up with the right product and the right value proposition for him, and that's where heavily tied to what the BharatPe journey has been, right? So at BharatPe, we always believed that you should not or you cannot make money in payments in India because it's a very low margin retail market in general, right? So if you're asking a retailer to pay a part of that as transaction charge, that's not going to fly for a long time, right? So and therefore the genesis of BharatPe in a way lies in thinking merchant first and coming up with a product which sort of works for them, right? So I think one part of making sense of chaos comes from thinking consumer first or customer first. I think the second part comes from building great teams, right? So no matter how brilliant you are as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, you will not go far if you don't have fantastic people who think of this as their own company and sort of building this, right? So a lot of my time actually, even during COVID, goes into market visits and meeting merchants and spending time on hiring, right? So I believe if I can get those two things right, a lot of other things will take care of themselves.
You have also seen 4x growth in the last few months of COVID, and you have also tabled yourself an ambitious plan of 5x growth.
Yeah.
And I'm sure with the competition heating up into the market now, there are many more players into the QR code based payments and various interesting business models. So, how are you trying to navigate now further into this newer segment of growth? What unique proposition are you trying to bring in?
So I think the way at least we see it, proposition is a sum product of two things, right? One is innovation on the product development side, and second is rock solid execution, right? So there are many people who tried to do the same business, same idea, some with success, some with failure, right? So and what really sets you apart in today's world, ideas are dime a dozen. I think the question is how well do you execute them, right? So and when I talk about execution, as you rightly said, there are tons of companies in the payment space, on the QR space. What really sets us apart is our focus on settlement rates for the merchants. Right? We
Yeah.
have the best settlement rates in the industry, which means the possibility of a transaction going through. And we invest a lot in technology, in AI, analytics, team to enable that to happen, right? So, and finance, for a lack of a better phrase, is actually a business of trust, right? So, if you are not able to settle merchant payments on time, no matter how novel an idea you have, you will not sort of find traction with them, right? So, I think that's one part of it that the idea may be simple, but how well you execute it, how well you live up to your merchant promise dictates how well you will scale. The second part is obviously we had this idea first, but we can't rest there, right? So we have to continuously innovate and launch new products. and solve other problems the merchant faces, right? And in that context, I don't know if you know, we launched India's first card acceptance machine, which has an option of zero transaction fees, right? So QR people have now solved, but can you do that on a card acceptance machine and sort of really enable digital transactions at the merchant level, right? So there's a lot of work happening on that front. Some initial success. The card business had scaled quite massively in the last 3-4 months. In fact, now 1/5 of the transaction value we process comes from the card business in just 4 months, right? So and which probably talks about the value of the proposition, right? So zero, if you give the merchant an option of zero payment, zero transaction charge acceptance, he obviously will sort of welcome it as compared to like having to pay like whatever 1.5-2% to take the payment. Similarly, there is a lot of work happening on the lending side because you have to understand the merchant, right? He's a small ticket business owner, probably has very limited credit history, if anything, probably has very small ITR, if at all, and therefore banks, in their conventional logic of lending, will never lend to these guys, right? So, how do you sort of build a product on the back of technology and data, which allows you to underwrite these merchants and actually lend to them, right? It sounds very simple, but it's actually a very complicated product and takes in like so much of data, and then you have to make sense of that, right? So that's something again we are focusing a lot on. And similarly, I think we typically pride ourselves on our rate of idea generation and rate of taking them to market. And there is a full team which is sort of working on product development cycle. If there is a fortnight we don't launch a new product or a feature, we get worried that we are being slow, right? So that's sort of the pace of innovation, which hopefully so far has kept us ahead of competition and hopefully will continue to do so.
Will there be any compliance related issues if you have lending and payments put together? Can there be a compliance related issues that organization can face, or how can one overcome that?
No, if you look at a bank, that's exactly what a bank does, right? Of course, I'm not saying we are a bank, but you use a bank to take money in, send it to friends, colleagues, business partners. So there is a full payments legs, and banks still process a lot more payments than UPI and swipe machines put together. And then banks do lending, right? So there is no sort of a risk of compliance in this. In fact, if I don't have the payments leg, I cannot do lending because I will not be able to underwrite a merchant, right? So payment for me is a zero money making business, but it's a cost I take to ensure that I am able to underwrite the merchant for lending, right? Without like big civil scores and without large ITR values, if we have to enable the SMB space to get lending, it has to be on the back of alternate data, and payments and money flow is actually the best form of data that you can.
I think that was a very good encapsulation of what you have learned out of all these years. Great, Suhail. It was a fantastic conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for
Thank
having me.
you very much for being with us. We look forward to more interesting conversations with you.